Hello, everyone, and welcome to Climate Pioneers, our new live interview series featuring the most ambitious innovators who are working to mitigate the climate crisis. I'm Heather Clancy. I'm the editor at large with GreenBiz, and I really appreciate you being here for the first episode of this great new project. I am basically conducting a live interview. I'm reporting a story here in front of your faces, and we will be taking your questions as well as my questions, and I'll be turning all of this into some really great coverage and case studies later on. I just wanted to say thank you to our first guest on this series, Karen Pflug. She is with Ingka Group, rather. She's the Chief Sustainability Officer she took that role on in August 2021. She's our guinea pig. She's very graciously agreed to be our guinea pig here. I want to just say that she's, we're going to get into this in a moment, but she's leading the strategy for close to 370 Ikea stores. Her background is as a textile designer. She previously held roles at Nike and Reebok, and she got into sustainability because she was really focused on quality. And she sees them too as being very closely linked. Karen, welcome to Climate Pioneers.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be the guinea pig with you. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Right. Well, when we met in New York, I was like, I have to interview her for the podcast or something. So anyway, this is great. This is a great project. So I think the first place to start is to help the audience understand how you fit into the larger organization, because Ingka Group is part of the larger Ikea Group organization. People know Ikea, the name. But tell us a little bit about how this works together, who you report to, who are your counterparts? I know there's a lot of sustainability officers at your group, at your company.
Yes, yeah, great. And thank you, because it can be quite complex, especially for people outside the organization. The main thing is hopefully that it's simple for consumers, that of course they see one Ikea brand wherever they shop around the world. And then we are all organized as a franchisee system. So as Heather, you mentioned, I work for the largest franchisee, which is Ingka Group. As well as Ikea Retail, we also have Ingka Investments, which is really contributing to a lot of great work we do on sustainability, which I can talk a bit about later. And we have some meeting places, shopping centers as well. And then we work really closely with Ikea, which is all the design, development, and the holder and owner of the Ikea brand. And I used to also previously work there when I worked in the quality space. And then within Ingka, I sit on what is called group management, the sort of senior management team, and report into the CFO. That's a deliberate choice, because I think you need finance to be your best friend when you're looking at what needs to happen from a transformational business change with sustainability. And then I sit with fellow colleagues across the business, whether that's communication, people and culture, driving the three businesses around centers, investments and retail, and of course innovation and so on, and digital transformation too. So we all sit together. And then you mentioned that we have many people working sustainability. We actually made all our country managers chief sustainability officers a few years ago. And they take that role extremely seriously, so that they can focus on that as well as running the business in the country where they operate.
So let me just play that back. Every country manager is also the sustainability lead.
Yes, in their country. And in fact, I was talking to our Italian country manager and CSO recently, and she said she's also made every person who's the store manager in Italy also the CSO in the store, because they're so determined to have a real focus on it in the business.
Right. We're going to get more into that local focus in a moment. But how do you work together with those country managers across the network? How do you work together to set goals? Is it a collaborative process? Is it,
Yeah, I mean, everything we do to transform sustainability or become more sustainable as a business, of course, needs to be collaborative. You can't have a separate department on the side and everyone else is still doing the day jobs, running the business. So we work together. We are working towards what we call a balanced scorecard, which is our value creation goals. And then we look, if you just take climate, for example, that's sort of an obvious one, where we look at what we need to do by 2030 and beyond with halving our emissions. And then we say, okay, what is it going to take to get there? And we break it down into what each country needs to do to deliver to that goal. So a goal letter is sent out to all the country chief sustainability officer, country managers each year at the start of the year. And then there's, of course, some dialogue and discussion, and there could be policies in their country that need to change. There could be things they can focus on more, like renewable heating and cooling or switching to zero emission deliveries. And then we do the same with circular and our what we call our fair and equal agenda, the human agenda as well. So we really take a holistic view on performance, and it's definitely, you know, collaboration and discussion.
Right. So as I was pouring through the company's report to prepare questions for this, because we only have a limited amount of time, one of the goals that really struck out and I felt was most appropriate to chat about with you was how the IKEA stores fit into the larger mission to reduce absolute emissions from the IKEA value chain at least 50% by 2030. So that's one of the big goals that you have.
Yes.
So so that's the big goal. How does that translate into action at the store level? So you take that goal, how did you kind of break that up and start looking at what you could do tactically in the field?
Yes, yeah, it is one of our big goals, as it would be for many businesses, of course, in line with the Paris Agreement and the latest science, which is really important, of course. And then holistically, as a business, we look at how we can make a difference in four main ways. One is our own operations, another is the offer to our customers, a third is what we do with Ingka investments, and a fourth would be advocacy, taking our brand seriously. People watch us, scrutinize us, and then we can be a force for good, driving things. So then if we look at what we do on a store level and look at our operations and then our offer to customers, on the operations side, it's a big focus on that switch to renewable heating and cooling. We're now already, when we look at renewable electricity, over 79% renewable electricity across our operations, and it's well over 93% when we only look at the stores. So that's around the world. We're already doing a really good job of converting there. We have over 1 million solar panels on the roofs of our stores. And then when we had the really big increases in energy prices, not last winter, the winter before, brought on by the Ukraine crisis, that also contributed to the stores being profitable from an operations point of view. So it's a win-win, and the payback and return on investment for that was much quicker than it had been previously because of the hike in energy prices. Looking at reducing waste in each store, we would have a waste group that really look at how we make sure that we're trying to get to zero waste to landfill. Looking at even our food waste. So many of people think of us as a furniture business, but we're also a big food business. So we've managed to halve our operational food waste, working with the co-workers in store there as well to really say, how do we, together using Winnow and AI technology, to identify what was getting thrown away. And then knowledge is power, so it teaches our co-workers to improve. So that's what we're doing on our sort of operations side. And then we're obviously how we help customers at a store level is really important as well. And we have what we call sustainable living shops, a section in our stores where we help focus customers on saving them money, which is super important and a big driver of behavioral change, but also then saving energy, water, saving, food leftovers, those sort of things too.
So I'd like to go back to a couple of things you said a moment ago, which was the renewable energy goal, right? So you mentioned the solar panels, and then you gave some percentages of where you are in renewable. How much of that is offsets or renewable energy certificates versus actual, like, okay, we're on a grid that's using clean power. I'd like to get a better sense of that, how that breaks down.
Yeah, no, it is all about using the renewable power, and we don't use offsetting when we're looking at our climate goals. And we've managed to reduce by 24.3% since our baseline of 2016. By really driving what we do in our own operations, of course, as well as all the other emission categories that we need to look at across scope 1, 2, and 3.
And those strategies that you were just mentioning, which we're going to poke deeper into in a moment, how responsible are the local teams for setting, okay, in this store, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and versus this store is doing Z and then why.
Yeah.
How does that work?
It's a little bit of both because there are some things where we need to just centrally steer. Our team, the group sustainability team, as we called, are the subject matter experts. So they know what we need to do to really drive the biggest impact that is going to then make sure we deliver on these 2030 goals and ultimately 2050. And of course, that feels a long way out when you're working in the retail space. So we need to guide with our subject matter expertise based on the facts, based on science. But then, of course, these are senior leaders who are running their store, their whole, we call it sort of the market area, because it includes the online sales as well, not just the store, who have often been in IKEA for many years. So they know how to operate their business well, and they take it seriously that they need to operate from a sustainability point of view too. But there are, there's some big things like the renewable electricity is a big one, switching to renewable heating and cooling, of course, switching to zero emission deliveries, going out to all our customers, and reducing waste. They're the biggies, but some stores need to focus more on one than the other. They know their
Hmm.
market much more than we can ever know
Hmm.
in the group function.
Hmm. What would you say has been the most important lever so far for that reduction you just mentioned? Is there any one thing that's been more impactful than others?
Well, our biggest emissions are sitting, like many companies are, in the materials and the product. And of course, that is steered by our inter-IKEA colleagues at IKEA of Sweden, where all the design and development is done. So they have a huge focus on the material agenda. So really switching to renewable and recycled materials by 2030 is a big focus. But then for the part that we play, the biggest impact as a retailer we can have is very much around what I spoke about, what we do in our own operations. But then we also can have a big impact with Ingka Investments, the investment arm I mentioned earlier, where they've pledged up to 2030, 7.5 billion euros for renewable energy, of which 4 billion is now already spent or committed. And 1 billion of that is actually also to drive innovation and transformation rather than just investing in solar or wind. So we're helping to contribute at a sort of societal level as well as helping our own business operations.
How is that money? I mean, how do you influence that money?
Well, I have to be very persuasive by them. Chocolate. I sit on the Ingka Investments Board together with many group management members as well. But also they have seen that it makes good business sense. When Ingka Investments was first set up many years ago, it was to provide financial resilience for the organization when times were tough in retail or whatever. But now, increasingly, as well as, of course, it's not a philanthropy. As well as that, we actually still need to make money, but they have seen the benefits for sustainability investments. So they've also done quite a lot on recycling mattresses, investing and collaborating with organizations there to recycle mattresses in Europe and prevent 1 million mattresses a year going to incineration and landfill. And then just on the philanthropy part, in terms of our setup as well, we do have the IKEA Foundation, and that is funded by some of our revenue. So all the profits that we make as a private business, 85% go back into making us a better organization, helping us to be more affordable, sustainable, and accessible to people around the world. And then 15% goes to the Ingka Foundation, which then funds the IKEA Foundation. So that's our philanthropic arm, where then it is more about doing good for people and planet without it needing to be a commercial agenda.
Got it. So to switch gears, you mentioned the sustainable home, right? So the sections of the stores that are
Yeah.
focused on this. Tell me more about that strategy. Let's start there. Again, one of your other goals is to reduce product use at home by
Yes.
70% by 2030. So I'm looking here for more information on how you're influencing consumer sustainability habits.
Yes, yeah. The product use at home comes primarily from making our sort of more the electrical appliances or LED more efficient, but then also helping to drive consumer behavior as well. So the sustainable living shop is an area where we have focused a dedicated area. It's often just before you go into the restaurant, so it's sort of everybody goes through it on the way to get some food, and it is focused on really key messages around making sure that it's better for the planet and the environment, but also helps save you money as well. So helping to reduce food waste with how sort of educating and sharing, buying containers. People often don't think of that as being sustainable, saving leftovers and not throwing food away. They often do it for financial reasons or not wanting to be wasteful, but it's a very sustainable thing to do. So providing containers and educating why that's important, how to store food safely and so on. In the markets where we have home solar, that is where you'll find information about there, signing up for that. LED bulbs, we did not invent the LED bulb, but we made it available and affordable for the masses, and that transformational change, that's where we can use our size and scale as a force for good. Water saving taps, little nozzles that you can convert your current tap, you don't have to buy the whole new tap system, to reduce the flow of the water as well. So really being cost conscious but also resource conscious as well.
So can you give me an examples of ones that have been done particularly well, or ones that have been particularly impactful against your own goals?
Yeah, I think, well, a lot of it is changing behavior, because when we've done research with GlobeScan, we've seen that many of our customers don't know what to do with that. Surveyed over 30,000 people in 31 countries, and they often say, we really don't know what to do, but we know 68% of them are worried about climate change. And they expect big businesses to do something, and governments as well, of course, but they also don't know what to do for themselves. Almost half of them think it's too expensive. So the biggest delight I have is showing that sustainability can be affordable as well, really making sure they understand that message and understanding their own personal agency, that small things can make a difference. And then outside of the sustainable living shop, I think where I get a lot of pride, where we can really create a movement, is in the food agenda. So moving to plant-based meals. So that's a big focus, where we'd like by 2025 to have 50% of the meals that we offer in our restaurants plant-based. We have, over 650 million people eat our food every year, so it's huge potential to drive change.
I have like about 5 different directions I want to go in right now, but let's stick with the I'm going to go back to the products in a moment, but let's stick with the food because that floors me, that number. I mean, people are just having lunch there, or just as they
Yeah.
come through, do they buy food to take home themselves?
Yes, we have both. I mean, there's the plant dogs, there's the plant balls that replace the iconic meatball, and of course we have plant-based ice cream and yogurts and things as well. In the section after you've gone through the till at the end, there's the Swedish food market, where you can take quite a lot of that home with you as well, particularly sort of substitutes for meat that you can then make lasagna and spaghetti bolognese out of and so on as well. That's a favorite in our family. So yeah, you can take the plant balls home too, to put in your freezer for sure.
So the goal is to shift in the in-store menus 50% to plant-based food. What's the
Yes.
rationale? What is the rationale for that?
Well, we know that we're talking to Johan Rockström, who's a eminent climate and sort of planetary boundaries scientist, that one of the biggest impacts individuals can make is to really switch to plant-based meals. They don't need to be fully vegan or vegetarian, but to just switch out some of their meals. So again, it's not about feeling guilty or punishment, but making it desirable, tasty, and appealing. But also, what we've done to steer this is to make sure that the plant-based alternative is always a lower price than the meat option. So that also sides with what we call the many people at Ikea, in terms of looking after their wallets as well when they're trying to feed their family. And we know that's a really big impact. If we look at the carbon that's associated with agriculture and food and so on as well, we can see that that's where individuals can have a real impact.
So you did mention some of the menu items. How have they been received? Like, is there anyone that's particularly popular? Is it like those balls that
Yeah.
you talked about before? Like, what percentage is the plant-based now versus the traditional?
We're sitting around average 38%. In
Mhm.
some markets, we're almost at 50 already. And I was particularly pleasantly surprised when I was visiting markets, Japan and South Korea last year, which are very meat focused markets, where they are really, they're vying. There's a little bit of competition. There's a league table to see who's going to get to the 50% first. So it fuels the spirit of competition between the countries as well. And yeah, they're in the high 40s already. But what they do is they localize what they serve with it. So in South Korea, you get it with kimchi rice, for example. So it's also, you know, in Italy, they do amazing pasta with it, with the plant balls flavors. But really popular is the plant-based ice cream, especially on a hot day, of course. It's a, you know, great price, cools you down, tastes good, and it's plant-based.
Did you go to different brands to help produce these products? I mean, are these traditional brands that you used or new ones? I mean,
I'm definitely not an expert on our food supply chain because
right.
that's managed by our inter-IKEA
Fair.
side, but I know that they work very closely with the sort of best food suppliers around the world. With the
Okay.
volumes that we create, they work very closely. And of course, then sort of the quality and sustainability elements. And it's got to taste good, of course, too.
Right, right. To go back to the products, right? The electronics products, the light bulbs, et cetera, the appliances rather. Why have a separate section? Why not just include those items everywhere and try to push for that to be ubiquitous across the
Yeah.
store?
They are actually everywhere. So you get a double hit. So if you go to the lighting section, you will
Hmm.
see the LED lights there as well. You'll also see signage and information. And the same if you go online and search lighting, you'll get the information on it there as well. And then appliances will be in the kitchen department, sort of really looking at how we show the different energy efficiencies for the stoves and the fridges and so on, and dishwashers as well. So it's about getting a double hit and having a focus area where we can really highlight what individual customers can do to change their lives today, which won't cost them much money and will actually in the long run save them money in one dedicated space.
So how has this changed your sales mix? Like, is this a competitive differentiator? What can you say about that?
I mean, in one way, you're right. Ideally, at the end, the entire store should be, you know, all sustainable products. But we're on a journey to get there and to have all of our products circular by 2030, of course. So for now, I think it is. We have seen increase in sales, and what we can't tell is if people pick it up in the sustainable living shop or if they pick it up in the department. But we have seen very high index of sales when we prioritize those products in the sustainable living shop. And you know, it doesn't matter to us where they pick it up from as long as they then get to take it home and get the benefits from it.
So I'm going to just call out to the audience to say that we will be taking questions in about 5 minutes. I know that a couple of you have already submitted, so I'm going to go to those. But I'm going to stick with circular for a moment because that is a really, I think, a huge differentiator for your organization. You've been testing a lot of different services. So to describe a couple of them.
Yes, yeah. So the design development, our inter-IKEA guys are on too, as I mentioned before, really developing the offer to make sure not just either recycled or renewable materials, but also being designed to be circular and be able to be recycled afterwards. From our side, we have an area called the as is, or sometimes called the circular hub, depending on which country you're in, where customers can go and really look at getting a bargain. There's been a product that customers may have brought back because we also have a buyback scheme that we've been testing for the last couple of years. Or it could be an ex-showroom model that we no longer need and so on. So people can get something that's even more affordable and already built in that as-is area. So the circular hubs are going well. In many of our markets, you can now look at the offer online and reserve it online before you go in, so you know your journey is worth it. The buyback, as I mentioned, started as a Green Friday campaign instead of Black Friday a few years ago, and then we decided to keep it going all year round so customers can bring their product back. They can also online get a sense of how much they would get for it, and they get a voucher that they can then save to put towards something else later. They don't have to use it straight away, which is great. And we also offer spare parts, which we've sent out over 24 million spare parts just last year. And that's for all the little things where if you move house and you lose the little bits that help put a shelf together, for example, you can get the spare parts sent out to you and then you don't need to get rid of the product. Now this is Hemney's behind me, which is a beautiful pine bookcase I've had for nearly 17 years. It has moved house with me quite a few times. And yeah, if you lose the little shelf pegs, then being able to just get new ones and replace those is so much better. The other thing we're doing is things like sofa covers. So when you either get tired of your sofa or it gets stained, and even when you wash it, you can't get the stains out anymore, or you just want a totally different look, you can get a sofa cover now. So you don't need to replace the whole sofa. It transforms the room by having a different sofa cover.
You mentioned a bunch of initiatives, of which you've now moved from a pilot phase into an actual service at the organization. How do you measure success? How do you decide you're going to do that? Right? Like this works. Let's do it. What metrics are you using to measure success?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we want it to be a commercial success. We are a business, but we also see we can think long term. We don't have shareholders that are chasing us for numbers every quarter or every month or whatever. So we tend to think long term as well, and we're able to then give things a real chance to prove themselves. We can test and learn. We can pilot in a couple of markets and then learn and grow before we roll it out to others. I mean, things like the buyback started off just as a one-off initiative, but even though it's still quite small numbers versus our current sales, it's growing exponentially. So there's more and more interest every year. So we can hang on in there, I think, longer than perhaps other companies can because of the way our business model is set up.
You said it's growing exponentially. Is there a specific demographic that it's appealing to in particular, a region?
Not really. I mean, it tends to be younger people, but I mean, that's we see that with them more when we do, again, the GlobeScan research. They are more concerned about climate, and they're also living differently, more about the sharing economy and what do I actually need to own versus what do I need to use, and so on. So I think we see younger people being more and more interested in that. But also, I know also from my own demographic, which is older, that people don't like to waste, and people like to be able to pass things on and give it a second, third, or even fourth life. So we see that a wider range of people want to use that.
Mm-hmm. That fits really well. That comment fits really well with a question from the audience. What excites you most about any shifts in sustainable consumption trends?
Well, that is one of them. I think that sort of rise of youth sort of really saying, how do I want to live my life today and what's really important to me? So I think that's a big focus. And then I think for us, it's about how do we really help our customers to either repair or reuse, acquire, pass on, and really extend, whatever the magic youth elixir is for furniture products, how do we really extend that? And perhaps when I was growing up, or even now still in some cultures, having secondhand was seen that you couldn't afford new. So it could be a little bit looked down on. And then actually now people see it's the sensible thing to do. I live with a Scot, and if anyone knows Scottish people, they're very careful and canny with their money. So he was more sustainable long before I was into sustainability, just by being really frugal, careful, not wasting anything, saving things, keeping things for a long time, saving leftovers of food and so on. So that excites me that that's now seen as cool and not, just because you can't afford new. So I like that. It's good, a good movement.
Okay, great. I have another really good audience question here. All of them are good, but I'm going to this one next. How does Ingka Group approach issues where the most sustainable choice is not the most cost-effective choice? Is there a formalized decision-making process?
We do have a formalized decision-making process. We have the group management that I mentioned before that I sit on. Then there is management board and ultimately our supervisory board. But we also have a young leaders advisory forum that work very closely with us, completely independent, external people from all over the world, including countries where we don't have Ikea stores, who hold us accountable, bring new ideas and a fresh new sort of approach to things as well. So again, I think because of our business model setup and the fact that we are not, chasing, shareholder value, we can really think long term. And what we've also found is that longer term investments can, because of the size and scale that we can help drive industry wide change, which in the end brings the prices down. That's particularly probably more with our inter-IKEA colleagues on the supply chain, where they can really change entire production lines into being both cost effective, efficient, and more sustainable. But to start with, the prices may well be higher. So it's about the longevity, the long-term mindset. That doesn't mean it's easy. We still have our country teams and also our designers and developers in inter-IKEA who have to hit, commercial targets and business targets, just like everybody else. So sometimes it can feel like a short-term dilemma, but when you really look into it, you realize it's not a dilemma at all.
Do you have sustainability built into their targets too?
Into our
Into that you mentioned the designers, like they have
yeah.
commercial
Oh,
targets, but
yes, yes, yeah, yeah. The designers, we have what we call democratic design, which is 5 dimensions of designing. So it's sustainability, low price, of course, quality, form, and function. And all 5 dimensions have to be hit when a designer is creating products. And we actually can map it on almost like a spider's web to show. And sometimes there's more balance on sustainability and sometimes more on quality and sometimes more, but all 5, the ideal dream product is one that is balanced in all 5 dimensions. And that is the criteria that our designers and developers use at Inter-IKEA. They also have worked very closely on circular design principles with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, so getting external expertise as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, they take that seriously.
I have another audience question I want to ask, but I want to just ask for a little bit more information about the young leaders
Yeah.
group that you mentioned. Like, how did you get this together? Does it change over on a regular basis? How many people? Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so it is fully external. We went with an external agency that helped us pull it together and find the right people that would challenge us from all different demographic backgrounds, apart from the fact they need to be young, of course, and a lot younger than we are in group
Define
management.
young.
Well, yeah, younger than our group management. I would say definitely under 30, many under 25,
Okay.
and some still in their late teens. But often activists with a very strong stance around climate issues in particular, but also then a just transition. So the human side of climate, so not just being the science, but really understanding how it impacts people, particularly in the global south. So we have a really good mix of people. We meet regularly with them in group management, our top management team. They've also presented in what we did with an extended senior leadership training last year, where they presented to, I think it was over 300 of our senior leaders, and really shared their concerns, their hopes, their dreams, and the things they would like us to do better at Ingka Group as well. And they've met with our supervisory board. They also give, they've actually got an independent review of our annual summary and sustainability report that you referred to earlier as well. So definitely hold us to account, quite rightly.
Great. Another question I have here, this relates back to the circular initiative, the bio-based glue,
Yeah,
right? And I know that this is a design for you smiling. Can you discuss that a little bit more? First of all, explain what it is, what I'm talking about for the audience, and how that pertains to your circular economy goals.
Yes, yeah. And again, this is really the expertise of our inter-IKEA colleagues, the designers and developers. They've worked quite a while on this one. But interestingly, the glue that goes into our flat pack furniture makes up about 4% of the overall footprint for our materials and product agenda. So it's quite a big impact. And it also, if it's not bio-based, makes it quite hard to recycle the materials that are otherwise bio-based, e.g. they're from wood. So by switching over to bio-based, we reduce the climate footprint of the glue, but we also then make the product more recyclable. So and if you build into that, as well as the fact that when we're using wood, we also have an ambition that by 2030, a third of the wood will also be recycled content in the wood. We're trying to be really resource smart and efficient. Even when the product is already a renewable material, we want to still
Hmm.
use
Hmm.
recycled.
So is durability also a goal?
Of course, and in my old job as a quality manager, put that hat on. I mean, for me, sustainability and quality go hand in hand,
Hmm.
because if a product's built to last and is super durable, people do keep it for longer, or even if they sell it or give it away to someone else who can keep it for longer. So the most durable, high quality products are the ones that are obviously the most sustainable in that way.
And the wood that you do source is FSC, I believe, or you're
Yes,
requiring that, right? Hmm.
yeah, all FSC certified. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Does that also apply to paper? There is a question here related to reducing paper waste. Can you comment on any projects in that area?
We have an overall waste agenda in Ingka Group, and we look at that on a material by material basis: cardboard, paper, glass and metal, of course, as well. So we are looking at how we recycle that to the best of our ability and want zero waste to landfill. And then, of course, in from a product point of view, in Inter IKEA, they've got a big focus on that too, making sure that it's recycled and so on too. Yeah.
Hmm. This is a good question. Can you speak to an example of IKEA using its scale to change its supply chain? So you're obviously buying these products that are more energy efficient, or less wasteful, et cetera. Ha- Give us an example of a situation where you went to a supplier and said, "Hey, could you change this?" Or maybe a group of suppliers.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I would say is about how we do business. We've been able to use our scale and size for a force for good, and that's with our iWay program, which is the IKEA way. That's an initiative where every supplier that works with IKEA must fulfill certain criteria about human rights, about environmental protection, no effluent discharge into rivers and streams and so on, air pollution around the area, making sure there's really good labor rights and so on. So we developed that well over 20 years ago. And that means we then have partners. In fact, even before iWay, we've had business partners, suppliers that have been suppliers of ours for decades. So we like to form really long-term, close relationships with suppliers. And then if you take from a product example, changing the industry, I would say LED is one of those ones where, yes, as I said before, we didn't invent it, but because we could go and say we can ensure and guarantee X amount of volume, help us to change the production line, and it's worth, and also sometimes helping them with actual investing into the production lines as well. The bio-based glue that we just talked about is another one that requires a whole production line change for any supplier who's producing what we call the flatline furniture. So yeah, there's many cases where actually we can really drive industry-wide change by having the size and volumes and the guaranteed then revenue for those suppliers. The other thing that Inter IKEA are doing with the suppliers is helping them switch to renewable energy for their production. So with grants and loans and things too. So that's more on the Inter IKEA side, but it's something that's also a source of pride as well, of course.
One last audience question before we get into a little bit of a speed round. What role, if any, did IKEA play in the development of some of the EU sustainability policies like CSRD?
Well, of course, we welcome all the new policies and changes because we want to have a level playing field and make sure that we can all report in a transparent way. And we obviously take that seriously as the company size we are. We do work closely. We have a public affairs team based in Brussels who really stay close to what is happening. And also sometimes those industry-wide groups that they put together where they want advisory groups from various business, including us, but other brands as well, because they want to see how you can make it happen in reality, in practical terms for businesses. And then, of course, we have a lot of work to do across our whole value chain to make sure that we are compliant as well and that we'll be ready for the reporting on time. But yeah, we have a lot of policy ask where we want to really help change the game, moving away from fossil fuel subsidies and things like that, where we think, again, let's use our voice for good.
Okay, I lied. I have one more audience question. Can you please tell us about your reforestation agenda?
Well, Well, we have two elements of forest in Ingka, and well, of course, across IKEA. One is Inter IKEA that uses the FSC certified wood that we talked about earlier. That we always make sure that we source that wood sustainably, and that's done through Inter IKEA. So they work together with suppliers and forest land around the world, and also independent audits to make sure that they're harvesting the wood in the best possible way. And then Ingka has forest land as well that we invest in. And it is, we do invest in it where we look at really good sustainable forestry practices, where we look at always planting more than we would then harvest. So that's how we're looking, and doing it in really good ways as well, moving towards sort of nature-based harvesting solutions.
Great. So we have a few more minutes left. Love to get your thoughts on some pretty basic things. I know this is my calendar's crazy. Who is on your recurring meeting list and why?
Oh yeah, well, I have quite a lot of meetings, like many of us all do, of course. I think, yeah, my fellow GM members, because we need to drive transformational change across the business together. So the business leaders of retail centers and investments, of course, and then communication, our finance team really unlocking, making sure we've got the budget to really drive the change. Our Inter IKEA colleagues, so my counterparts and their team at Inter, we have to work so closely for a one IKEA approach. And then external, get real energy from collaborating, co-creating and sharing ideas with fellow CSOs from other businesses around the world as well. So get a lot of energy from that.
How do you build camaraderie across your team in a hybrid work environment?
Yeah, it is a bit tricky. I've got some people based in the Netherlands with me and some based in Sweden, just in my core team. And then we have people all over the world, of course. I think it is about making sure that we come together when we can to really have some fun as well as discuss business topics. Sustainability is quite heavy. It can be heavy on the heart and heavy on the mind, the serious topics. But my team in particular are highly engaged when we do this, what we call the iShare survey of our co-workers and get the sentiment. They're really, really engaged, and they also have a high employer NPS score, so whether they would recommend to a friend that they work for IKEA. So I think they live and breathe their jobs, which means you don't have to try and inspire and engage them. They're already inspired enough. But it is about making sure you come together to celebrate the wins as well as, otherwise you end up talking about the challenges all the time in sustainability. So definitely time to celebrate, I think.
So how do you manage eco anxiety? Right, we're talking about that a little bit.
Yes, yeah. I think leading with optimism is really important, but not blind optimism. Absolutely not. I think it's optimism based on agency and responsibility, and taking that responsibility seriously, but not taking yourself too seriously. So I just was listening to one of the Outrage and Optimism podcasts where they had Dr. Hannah Ritchie from Oxford University on, and she's got a book called Not the End of the World, I think it is. And here she talks about that sort of realistic optimism where, yes, things are bad. Yes, things are happening and we need to act with urgency, but we also have made progress. And I also think that so many solutions already exist today. As you came to the Action Speaks summit we had in New York last year at Climate Week, where we wanted to showcase, and that was just the start of it. Actually, we're going to carry on with that as a platform digitally, but showcase that many solutions are out there. And I also really enjoy the fact that there's so much discussion now on how do we unlock the finance for driving this change, both for climate and nature.
So is that what makes you optimistic? That was going to be my next question. What makes you optimistic?
Yeah, it is that the solutions exist, and the fact that we can really drive change, working for an organization that takes it seriously, where you're not having the why question with your board or your management team. They're actually saying, hurry up and get on with it. And then also for me today, I love sport, and my outlet is being able to get outside in nature and do sport. And when you go and see what a beautiful place nature is and planet Earth is as well, I get a lot of energy as well as a lot of desire to do my part, of course.
So what is your biggest pet peeve about consumer sustainability habits?
so much the habits, but the assumptions. I would say the assumption that it's more expensive to live sustainably, and that's one of the things that we're really out to bust that myth and prove that it's not, because we want to make sure that sustainability is not just for the chosen few, and that could be not even about buying products from us, but helping to educate and inform people. And I guess a peeve would be if people give up hope and think, why should I bother? I can't make a difference. Every single one of us can make a difference, and no matter how small, it all adds up.
We know your bookcase is 17 years old, so how else are you sustainable at home?
Yeah, well, my kids who are 16 and 11 will probably go, oh, mom's a bit of a nag about not throwing anything away, especially food waste. I had that built in from me growing up in Yorkshire as well, with parents who are not quite as bad as Scottish people, but almost, in terms of being quite, frugal and not throwing anything away. And particularly food waste is probably a pet peeve with my kids. And then I can cycle to work. I live very close to the office, and I love cycling anyway. And the Netherlands is a great network of bike paths. I know it's harder in other countries to do that. But yeah, it's also about trying to buy with quality, things that I keep for a long time. Having worked in textiles and fashion, I am really conscious of the materials that I choose, and things that then I know that I love and will keep for sometimes decades.
Right. One last question. What would you have done differently if you could start over?
Tricky. I guess I probably would have. I'd have liked to have gone into sustainability sooner. But then if I look at my career doing textile design, right at the start with my university thesis was on eco textiles back in the 90s, when it was a thing back then, and really looking at linen and sustainable materials and so on in home furnishings. So quite funny that I ended up finally, after many other brands, ending up with Ikea. But I have a real energy and sense of catching up a little bit, that it would have been great to start my sustainability journey sooner, to actually be in a sustainable role. But of course, everyone can make a difference, whatever role they're in.
Well, I hate to end it, but we are out of time. And I just want to thank you so much again for being the first guest on our Climate Pioneer series. It really has been a pleasure. Lots for me to write about. I'm excited to be following up. For those of you who are watching and listening, thank you so much for being here and for giving us a try. Look for my coverage coming soon, probably the week of May 6th. And also watch for the registration link for our next Climate Pioneers interview on May 14th, when I'll be interviewing Eileen Lurch from Allbirds. She's the Director of Sustainability. Thank you so much for your time. I'm Heather Clancy. Take care and be well.
Thank you.